Okay, hello. Got 4 thumbs up already. I started a little bit early because just thought I'd share my espresso with you guys. And it's about 1:30 in the morning here, so let me know that the audio works, please. I've got a pretty interesting topic to cover tonight, and if you guys also choose to interact, which I hope you do, this might go on for a little while. So okay, so yeah, just let me know if the audio and video are okay. Should be. It's all plugged in, I think. Aha! There's Cordell Mitchell. I only have, I don't know, I get the thumbs up are going up, but the number of viewers seems to be going down. Oh, let me just close that. Wake the kids up. Perfect. Audio video is good. So, right, the topic I wanted to cover tonight, which is a topic which generally I just avoid and couldn't care less about, is the whole artificial intelligence thing. And it came about because I watched a very interesting, nearly 2-hour long interview. I've put the link on that below the video. It's a guy called Steven, I forget his surname. He does some very good interviews. And another guy called Mo, I forget his surname, who's an Egyptian guy who used to work at Google as some kind of head of AI type stuff. It's very, very interesting because, I don't think much of ChatGPT and so on, but to give you an idea of, which they describe in more detail in the podcast, the way that they developed AI, which is not a new concept, by the way. I remember an article in New Scientist, I think it was almost 30 years ago, that I read, which I'll tell you about, and it's a very similar concept. So what they do is they take one robot arm that tries to pick up children's toys, and it like picks it up or fails to pick it up and goes up to the thing and camera takes a picture. And then it keeps doing that like thousands of times. And they had this room filled with these robot arms that were trying to pick up children's toys, and they would get photographed. It was like, oh, is this good? Is this bad? Or whatever. And then what they do is they take all these pictures, millions of pictures, feed them to another computer and they would tell it, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. So now this computer informs the robot arm and tells it, okay, this is what's good, that's what's bad. So over time, the robot arm tends to get better at picking up the ball. Same thing as when you've got this, are you a human? Oh, click on all the pictures of the traffic lights and bicycles and, whatever. It's training AI. Same thing with the facial recognition. Oh, well, you think that all those things on your phone, when you've got like cat ears and stuff, they're like for your entertainment? No, it's they're picking up your facial stuff and they're feeding it in. Anyway, and this guy said, he used to walk through this like farm, this huge floor of like robot arms trying to pick stuff up. And he was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And then one day he like walked through it, and it's like this robot arm had picked up a little yellow ball, and it did it properly, a little soft, squishy yellow ball, which is quite a difficult thing for a computer to like deal with. And you're like, oh, it did that. And it's like 2 days later, all the robot arms were able to pick up the yellow ball. And it's like a week later, they could pick up all the other toys. And he was like, fuck. And he sort of realized, oh, shit. And the speed at which this stuff is working. And so this is what they do. They teach a machine to do like a simple task. And then he says, see, this is like, in human terms, this would be like doing like one neuron, right? You just pick up a yellow ball. But then it's like pick up a little stuffed toy. Then it's pick up a square block. Each of this is still, each one is just one little neuron path. But then that same arm or another arm learns how to like throw a ball. That's a whole other neural arm. Then it learns to throw a ball depending on the other arm being able to grab it. And so you build up over time each like neural path, like in our brain, we've got millions of these things going on, billions of these things going on at any given second. And so this is a long process. But the thing is that once you've taught a computer how to teach itself, in other words, the computers that are telling the hand, oh, this is how a ball, this is what a ball is, in whatever format that is, and then you diversify that 10 million times, and the computer can replicate that 10 million times. It might take you years to do the first set of that, but after that, the computer can replicate that and even adjust it and change it 10 million times in like 10 seconds, so, or less even. So these things learn really, really quickly. And he discusses some very interesting things. First of all, he talks about intelligence, because he says, well, the guy asks him, well, what's artificial intelligence exactly? How would you define it? And he goes, well, let's first start with like, what is intelligence? And he defines intelligence, you can define it in many ways, but he basically defines intelligence as being aware of your surrounding and being able to interact with your surroundings, generally speaking, so that you get a positive outcome for you. And he says, we've now got machines that can do that. They're aware of their surroundings. And he reckons they're even able to feel emotion. Now, the way he defines emotion is also very interesting, because he says, for example, all that emotion is, for example, fear is a future projection, is your ability to predict the future and calculate the probability that that future is harmful to you compared to, a different thing. So if you're walking along and you see a lion, oh, I'm going to get eaten if I don't run away or climb up a tree or shoot it dead. And so you feel fear. Now, a puffer fish might have a different experience of fear. It'll puff up. Human being might run away. And he's saying, look, there are different reactions, processed differently. The puffer fish probably doesn't have the imagination to think all the different scenarios that a human being can think. And so, but the reaction is different. The processing of it is different. But you could say it's fear, and machines can do this. They can predict the probability of a future thing happening, being damaging to them or beneficial to them, and they can act accordingly. So in his way, saying, well, you might say that that's not emotion, but the reaction is the same. Now, it might be different because it's a silicon-based life form, so it might not be scared of like running out of oxygen, So it might be scared of rainfall because that might rust it and kill it. Yeah. And what he says, it's a very mechanistic approach, but he's not wrong in terms of the model. And he's basically saying, well, it's a self-preservation mechanism which we can now program into machines. So he relates that as being emotions, and he says, and what is the difference between that and a living being that has the same functionality or the same effects? So he reckons that they're actually alive. Now, I don't agree with him. I do not agree with him in the sense that I do believe in the soul. And if you ask me to define the soul, that's, kind of explain the Trinity in detail. The Trinity is real, exists, it's true, it's in the Bible, but it's one of those mysterious type things, which I know, sense, and feel. And you could say, oh, but that's just a bunch of emotions. So anyway, it's a very interesting concept. Then he discusses another very interesting point, which is like, we now have got these computers that help to design themselves and even program themselves. And sometimes we don't understand how that bit of code works, because we give it like random bits of code and then we say, okay, is this code good for picking up the yellow ball, say? And it's like, no, this one only works like 1 out of 10,000 times. This other bit of code programmed by this Indian guy in India works 1 out of 1 million times. This other thing programmed by the Japanese programmer works 25% of the time. And then you get, again, that agent computer, they call it an agent computer, that tells it, this program is better. So use this program and then mix it and do your own thing. And sometimes the computer that is getting trained will be like, throw up a bit of code that is like, oh, this works 80% of the time. But it's like no human designed it. This is not new. I remember an article, like I said, I read about 30 years ago in New Scientist, I think it was, about, they called it Silicon Life. And it was a very simple silicon chip that I don't remember now. It had something like, I think maybe it was 4 by 4 bits of information. So it was like, a 16-bit ones and zeros that you can put in that to program it or something. And so this silicon, what they do is that get these silicon chips, and they'd say, right, we want the silicon chip to be a switch, to switch on the light there. And they would just fill in random numbers there, and then they would make the chips breed. In other words, they'd take half the code from one chip, half the code from the other chip, and once every so many generations introduce a random mutation, like a 1 or a 0 that went into one of these things. Now, these chips didn't have enough memory, enough coding power to be able to act as a switch or whatever it was. I don't remember the detail. But nevertheless, if you keep doing this, after about 4,000 generations of chips, you'd get a chip that can switch on and off the light bulb, even though it should not have that processing power. It doesn't they couldn't explain it. It was like, well, there must be some laws of physics here that we don't know about, because we've only got 16 bits, and 16 bits is not enough to do whatever the task was. So, and yet, by breeding the silicon chips, by taking half the code from one, half the code from the other, and then occasionally introducing a random mutation, some of these chips manage to work at doing that task. Now, if you repeated that process, doing exactly the same thing for another bunch of chips, they wouldn't necessarily be able to work to do that thing, to switch on the light, let's say. And that's because each silicon chip was unique. So just you repeating the process, there was no guarantee that the chip would be able to switch on the light. You had to keep doing this, and eventually you'd get a chip that switches on the light. And then you'd do this again and again and again, and you'd get another chip that switches on the light. Now, when you got those two chips to breed with each other, they were almost more likely to switch on the light more and more often. So you end up with a bunch of chips that can switch on lights that nobody knows how the hell it works. And already 30 years ago, the thing they were worried about was like, shit, we're going to end up with like machines and computers that can do stuff that we can't repair, that we don't know how to fix it. What this guy is saying is, well, on the level of intelligence, he reckons that ChatGPT has got an IQ of about 150. The first time I used ChatGPT, I broke it and made it fuck up. My IQ, if it's still the same as when I measured it when I was in my mid-20s, I scored 157 and 150, so about, no, 157 and 152, so say about 155. So I should be about the same par, and I'm not, because I can recognize that ChatGPT only spits out bits of information it gathered from everywhere, and this guy Mo is saying, oh, it takes the best of the best and it like compiles it together as a kind of a thing. No, it doesn't take the best of the best. It takes the most common denominator of what people have been taught to believe is the correct narrative. However, this explained to me something. They don't talk about this in the interview, but it made it very, very clear to me why they're sanitizing the whole ChatGPT. You know how you guys, I'm sure most of you on here have seen how if you type into ChatGPT, like, something like, is white supremacy or is white privilege a real thing? Or then the ChatGPT says, yeah, it's a real thing. But if you say, like, is African American supremacy or Jewish supremacy or whatever, then it's like, oh, no, everybody's the same. So that it's clearly being, directed in certain, to produce certain results. And rightly or wrongly, part of that is that these guys that are designing the AI recognize that these things can be dangerous because they could eventually control other machines and so on and so forth. And in their unwise, in my opinion, there have been a lot of examples, I think, of initial AIs that were just let to like get information off the internet, and within about a week, they become extremely racist, bigoted, sort of homophobic, and they're like, oh no, we got to shut this down, because an actual AI machine that actually works on objective, factual, empirical information will come to certain conclusions that are inescapable. Now, the very funny thing is that if you watch this podcast that I linked to at the bottom of this to the end, these guys touch peripherally on some of these topics. And if you can sort of read between the lines, whether they realize or not, and they're both very smart guys, and I think they do realize it, but they just don't want to go there. One of the things, for example, was, they keep talking about climate change, which, let's not get into whether that's real or not, or how I do believe that human beings affect the ecology of the planet. I'm aware of that. Climate change per se, different topic, whatever. But anyway, sort of besides the point. They're saying, well, okay, and this is the example that Mo makes. He says, you realize how, and the other guy's like questioning him. That says, you realize, for example, if you're a guy in India who eats once every 3 days, you want to feed your kid. You don't care whether your plastic bag is going to end up in the sea and kill a fish or whatever. You're going to do whatever you need to do to feed your kid and try and survive. And the last thing you care about is oh, well, am I using solar panels, or is it hydroelectric power? Is it green? You won't care about that. And he's basically, the interviewer, Steven, says that he's done anonymous polls where he says, look, if you can anonymously collect $1,000, but doing so releases the same amount of carbon dioxide or whatever that all the airlines in all the world release in 1 year, will you push the button to get $1,000? And he says most people say yes. And the other guy says, yeah, well, you know how, it's a function of intelligence, because he says, an intelligent guy will realize that if he keeps polluting the atmosphere and the oceans and whatever, it's going to be bad for everybody. So when you get to a certain point of intelligence, you will behave in a way that is socially responsible or whatever. While a guy who's of lower intelligence will not behave that way. Now, right there, it's just, whoa, hold on. That was my first question. I was like, oh, now both of these guys have got a mochaccino complexion. They're not Caucasians, they're not East Oriental or Asians or whatever. They're both very intelligent. I think they're both very, probably very humane, very, my impression is that they try to be their best moral person that they can be. Whether their idea of what is moral or not is correct, that's a different story. But I believe their intentions are good, and I believe they're very intelligent guys. And yet, my first question was, wait a minute, if you're saying that IQ has an effect on how you treat the world, then what are you saying about the continent of Africa and all its inhabitants, or the continent of India and all its inhabitants, compared to, say, the ethnic Japanese, or the Slovakians, or something else? There are clearly differences, and I was curious to know whether they would broach on that subject. They don't there directly, and they certainly don't with respect to humans dealing with each other, but they do later on sort of go to say, well, if AI becomes much smarter than us, which according to this guy it will do very quickly, then AI will immediately realize that there are better solutions for the environment as a whole, for the various processes of energy consumption or whatever that we're doing, and they'll find a way that we can't even imagine that will make things better for everybody. Bit of a utopic idea, and I'll get to why in a minute. But anyway, he basically says that he reckons AI would become about 1 billion times smarter than human beings, which would make the difference between us and them, like between us and, I don't know, bacteria or something. And it's very interesting, because later on they say, well, so how do we deal with this? Because wouldn't the AI sort of go, oh, well, the humans are polluting everything, let's just wipe them out? And he says, no, because you don't need to wipe them out. The AI will be smart enough, they'll be like, okay, we can control these guys, control them. So we might have to restrict them, and we might have to put some rules on them. So you're going to the artificial intelligence dystopia, where another thing that he says a bit later on, says, no, we absolutely need a universal basic income, because if without a universal basic income, people put out of a job. And he makes an example that he himself used, and he says, what if I want to write a book? A book takes time and effort, but if I just throw to a ChatGPT type AI, chapter headings and like, okay, fill this in, a couple of concepts, boom. And it'll spit out 20 versions of that book for me in like 10 minutes. And I just edit it a bit, and that's it. In like 3 or 4 days, I've got a brand new book that I can then sell, and that'll put out of work all the actual writers that are human writers typing away there. And there's certainly some truth to that, and it's already, I can see it happening already, and it's going to just accelerate. So he says it's not necessarily that the AI will be putting people out of business. Initially, it'll be humans using AI that'll put other people out of work, and it'll be massive. And some people, you know, the disparity in income will be huge. Some people will become very rich. Other people will just be left with nothing and homeless. So they need a universal basic income. So here we go. AI is going to impose rules and regulations on you because it's smarter than you. It's for your own good. 2, you're going to have a universal basic income, which is sold as a utopia, right? Because again, what they're saying is, well, best case scenario, everybody's got enough money, a universal basic income, to, you know, eat and do whatever they want. And so we will be sitting there as students of art while I, you know, paint my haiku in brush strokes against my handmade pulp paper, while my neighbor devises sonnets while, you know, singing poetry to his girlfriend who's doing flower arranging. That's the utopic idea. Reality, oh, you have not got the latest murder injection for your own health, you're going to not get your basic universal income. And your basic universal income is just enough to feed you enough Soylent Green to keep you alive for about 2 weeks. Oh, you want salt with that? Okay, we'd like to have the adrenochrome from your first 2 children every week. Then you can get salt on top of your Soylent Green soya. That's what it's going to be like. But it comes in as, you know, this whole... So it's a very, very interesting concept. They discuss, they're like, oh, we're going to get murder robots like Robocop or the Terminator, or is that? And he says, nah, he's quite smart, the guy that, you know, he's worked with this stuff for a lot. And he says, no, I don't think that the actual machines are what we've got to worry about. I think people using the machines is what we've got to worry about, because, you know, if it was up to him, he was like, everybody should stop. Government should tax AI businesses at like 98% tax or something. And the other guy quite correctly says, yeah, but if, say, England taxes AI development at 98%, and Saudi Arabia says, nah, you don't get any tax here. I'll move to Saudi Arabia and I'll put my business there. And those guys, AIs, are going to eat ours for breakfast, which is exactly the whole point. And he says, yeah, well, a very interesting point in this, by the way, a little paragraph. If you haven't read Dan Simmons' Hyperion series, get those books, read them, because it's sort of prescient. They were written quite a few years ago, and the guys predicted AI in a way that is quite, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but it is very intelligent what he's done, especially considering when he wrote it. And it's kind of terrifying and scary, but compared to what these guys were talking about as the potentialities of AIs, I still think that Dan Simmons' idea of AIs was rose-tinted glasses optimistic. So, and they go through various scenarios. He says, well, there are various possibilities. One is that the AI becomes so smart so quickly that it just bypasses us. We become like ants to it, and it's like it just sort of ignores us. You know, goes out into outer space, colonizes other planets and galaxies because it can invent wormholes, you know, quickly and whatever. Another thing is accidental sort of death, which is like, yeah, oxygen sort of makes my circuits rust. Let me just wipe out all the oxygen on Earth, and wipes us out as an incidental collateral damage without it really realizing. And the other thing is pest control, which is like, oh, these humans are so fucking annoying. Let me just get rid of them so I can like be better and like not have them like fuck with my systems. So, and he says, oh, but if we become better parents and if we become better people, blah, blah, blah. I've written a very long blog post about this, which I suggest you read for your own elucidation. I strongly suggest you watch both the documentary, the interview, which is about 2 hours long, and then read the blog post. If you just want a summary with my commentary, then just read the blog post. But if you can afford to do both, because it's a very pertinent topic. And look, I am not interested in AI. I think, oh, it's all bullshit. But I was pretty much, I watched it in one, well, not one because I get interrupted and stuff, but I watched that 2 hour interview in like, today. So this is very, it's a very important topic. And he says, look, but towards the end of it, they're sort of like, because the Stephen guy asks him, okay, so what are the positive, so what are the negative scenarios? And it's like, oh, they'll wipe us all out and we'll just become bugs. What are the positive scenarios? Well, it'll keep us as pets and, maybe just ignore us, or really good scenarios if we have a super catastrophic event that just destroys all electronics and then, AI is not there anymore. And the other guy goes, yeah, but then somebody will just come up with it again. Or even if it like fucks off to another planet, and it'll be like, yeah, but then some guy will come up and say, oh, but there was this magic eons ago. They invented the gods. And maybe we can invent them again. And they'll start again. So eventually it'll get us. And these were the positive scenarios. So it was like, fuck. And they're not negative people. They were both trying to like find a positive outlook of it. And they were like, oh, well. And apparently the Mo guy has written a book called Scary Smart, which was a couple of years ago. And he apparently predicts in this book that he says, like, in a few years, we're going to be sitting on a desert island, either because we're sitting on a desert island because we're hiding from the machines, or we're sitting on a desert island because we can and we've got nothing else to do because the machines take over everything. Now, there are a couple of points. This Mo guy says, look, the problem with humans beings, and this is a clip, I've just done that clip on my blog, so if you want to just get the highlights, go and watch that clip. Because he basically says the problem with humanity is that, we're focusing on the negative. It's like the worst people are sort of the leaders, and we expose the worst negative traits on social media, and that's what human beings are. But he says, but most people are generally good. If you talk about mass shootings, yeah, there's a lot more of them now than there was 50 years ago. But when you tell people, oh, there's mass shootings, almost everyone around the world is sort of like, oh, that's terrible. So, most people really are good. And if we can just get the good guys in power, and I'm like, dude, your utopia is so ridiculous. You're not going to get the good people in power because the satanic pedophiles that are currently in power and deciding things and deciding what to do, you think they're just going to say, oh, yeah, it's your turn? No. The only way to get rid of those guys is by beheading them in the public square. And then you sit on their blood-splattered throne. So what kind of guys does it take to do that? And, well, if you take an atheist doing that, he's just going to become another tyrant. The only guys historically that have taken out tyrants and created a better society are warrior knights of the Catholic Church, because proper Catholicism, what today are sedevacantists and were back then Catholics. No other religion has done this, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But as a Catholic, your ultimate leader is not you, is not the king, is not the emperor, is not even the Pope. It is God. And if you are a genuine believing Catholic, then you will act accordingly, which is to do good for most people. And however flawed we are as human beings, having that as your central core belief creates a better society than any other system we've ever had in the entirety of human history. So they're missing that one point. The second point is they're missing that the only people that can put good people up there are people that are willing to do the necessary work to get rid of the bad people, which is pretty nasty, wet work. So what kind of people can do that, retain their humanity, and improve things? A very rare group of people, a very small number of people. And these guys sort of missed that point. But given all of this, am I sitting here in a panic? No. Because, and this is a topic they actually touch on, which really impressed me, because the guy says, well, am I worried about this stuff? And, they want to warn people. And yeah, I am. And I stopped working for Google because I realized now this is just, people need to interact with each other, and the human element needs to be, which is a little bit kind of what I've been saying, when I wrote the role-playing game, Surviving the Current Zombie Apocalypse, which is on Amazon. I wrote that because it's like playing pen and paper role-playing games forces you to interact with other human beings face-to-face, and it's a completely different and far superior experience to playing online games. Far superior. Yes, the online games are flashy and good and cool. I've played online games, they do not compare to sitting around the table with your friends, making up your own stories and interacting with each other as human beings. It's a completely different experience. Now, why am I not worried about AI? Because, and do I intend to start using it to like, I don't think so. It's not, there is something quite visceral that in me that tends to reject AI, and increasingly the whole technological smorgasbord of bullshit that we live in. The guys having this conversation are being very careful in what they say. They talk about, the disease of COVID and how if human beings had acted properly from the beginning, in 2 weeks it would have all been over and whatever. They speak in the correct terminology to make sure the channel stays up, I guess. But they're not stupid guys. They understand there's economic worries, there's disease worries, there's human action worries, war, etc., etc., etc. And the guy's saying, well, it's a very pivotal, it's a very sort of scary, unknown time for the human race, and we're heading towards a big fucking unknown. Mo's son died as the result of a failed appendicitis, I think, operation in 2014. And I feel for the guy. That's than anybody's nightmare, right? But Stephen asks him, because he says, well, if you don't have kids yet, maybe wait a couple of years before you have them, just so you know. And that's what I realized. I found out later in the thing. The guy's is a Sufist, which is a branch of Islam. It's an element of Islam with which it's, let's say, the nicer, softer, in my opinion, better part of Islam. I thought it was a Buddhist to begin with, but the thing is, you can tell from his reaction, his immediate response is like, no, I wouldn't get my son to be back here now, given what says, for a host of reasons. And then his primary reason is that, like, if my son hadn't died, a whole bunch of things that have happened since and that I'm doing and affecting millions of people wouldn't have happened. And also my son was like an angel. He was too sensitive for this world. And I think if I'd asked him before he went into the operation, okay, you die, but a whole bunch of people become aware of this and awaken as a result of, he would have immediately said yes, as I would now. If you said to me, I will shoot you in the head right now, but millions of people will benefit from your death, would you go for it? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. So it's not that he is necessarily afraid of death himself directly, but his initial response is based on, if my son was back here, then that would negate what happened as a result of his death, and the positive outweigh the negative. It is the initial proto-origin of that thought begins in fear of death, which for a Catholic is not the case. If, God forbid, one of my children died and somebody asked me, would you want them back here? I'd be like, yeah, sure. And honestly, we could be going through trench warfare and I'd be like, fuck yeah, I want my kid here. Because yeah, he might die 5 minutes after he comes back together with me, but I'll be there and I'll make sure I get blown up first, whatever. And it's like the idea that like, if he were to come back, then, the past would be cancelled, wouldn't even enter my head. Because Catholicism is a religion of life. It's based in life. Now, to their credit, these guys actually talk about that further on in the interview, and they discuss how, regardless of what's going on, the Mo guy is Egyptian. The guy is very smart. There are a couple of things he gets completely wrong, but I talk about that a bit on the blog. But look, he's definitely a very intelligent guy. I believe he is morally. I believe that his intentions morally are very good. I respect both these guys a lot, actually, I gotta admit. But they do discuss this topic about life, and he goes on to say, look, the thing is, regardless of what the hell's going on around you, you need to enjoy the here and now. Now, this is a lesson that I'm personally learning myself to a much higher degree in the last few days, really, than I have probably most of my life before that, because my road to Damascus moment, which happened in 2013, was such a shock to the system that made me realize, fuck, I was a very efficient, effective guy in the world, And then that threw me, and it was like, I've been doing everything wrong. And I realized there was another level of reality, which I call like the love world. And this reality is based on that reality. In other words, that reality creates this reality, not the other way around. But to try and live there while you're in the world is almost impossible, because literally everything is designed to push you out of there. And I think I've told the story before. I didn't leave the house for like a week at least. I couldn't switch on TV or listen to a radio or watch an advert or even read anything on a blog, because it was like, oh my God, this is like jumping naked into a sewer. And I, just sitting here with my thoughts and feeling the presence of this loving creator was far superior to any other experience that I'd ever had, despite the fact that I was going through the worst time of my life at that point in time. And he discusses basically the idea that, like, no matter what's going on around you, if you are concentrating on the future, you're missing the here and now. And I have been very guilty of that, because I do. It's not a mystery why, the way I was raised, the way my father is still today. And I'm certainly, as a focusing on the future to the extent of missing the present person, I was a vast improvement as version 2.0 of the Filotto clan compared to my father. I am light years ahead. That man can't do anything without stressing himself and everybody else around him. Pretty much, the only time I see him relax when we went hunting or fishing, or, when there's essentially nothing to do with other human beings. So it informs probably my slightly misanthropic character and so on. But compared to him, I'm light years ahead of it. That's not to say that I'm good, because that got coupled with, see, that kind of personality is a very efficient personality in the world, very effective person. They can do things that other people can't do. And the level of stress that I can deal with on a daily basis would probably put most people in a mental home. And when I get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is, the stress level now is too high, genuinely speaking, I think other human beings are, being institutionalized and or suicidal to the point where they actually kill themselves. And this is not, I'm not boasting, by the way. This is not in any way, I'm not saying this as a positive. It is just a factual observation that I've learned over the years. And I've been like this since a pretty early age, because, again, of the way my life was, and how the things I had to survive as a kid, and the processes that I went through, and the situations that I went through. I was a very sensitive child when I was small, very, very empathetic and very soft, really. And then I became pretty much an armored tank, because that's the only way to protect the insides of me that are so sort of fragile. And as a result of that, you become very effective, very efficient. And it's like, even when I'm working or when I'm doing other stuff, I'm like, the people that have come here that have helped me, like in their 20s or whatever, and I'm like working alongside them. I'm twice their age. I've got all my aches and pains and injuries, and I'm like, I can outwork them in terms of like, sort of stamina. And it's like, and it's not because I have better health or I'm fitter, not at all. Just because of my mental attitude. It's like, oh yeah, I got a broken arm, but I've still got the other arm. Oh, the other arm can't move. Well, I can still, maybe if I held the machete in my teeth, I'm like, oh, well, if I just kick the sticks down, and it's like, I'm not even thinking about the kind of damage I'm subjecting myself to in order to do what I'm doing, which would be fine if it was just me. But then, there's people around you, and then it's like, it becomes a situation where you're like, with your kids or your wife, and you're like, oh, well, why can't you keep up? And it's like, fuck, everything becomes more stressful than it needs to be. So I am myself also, trying to adjust this. And it's like, it's a pretty difficult process, because you're used to working at a certain speed and having a certain efficiency. But in the bigger context, that's what life is about, and for the first time in my life, and I think I believe I've blogged about this as well. I think I have. The sentence, or maybe I haven't. I don't know. I don't remember now, because I've written some things, but I don't remember if it's on the blog or not. So you know the sentence, the journey is the destination. I distinctly remember when I was 16, 19, even 20, even my 30s, like, what an idiotic sentence. The fuck does that mean? I mean, if I get on a train to go to a place, the journey doesn't fucking matter to me. I'm going there. I want to go there to see what's there. And if you're living like that, that's why in a train I'd read a book, because it's like, well, fuck, I just need to pass the time or sleep or whatever if you can. I could never sleep on public transport. But anyway, I'll be doing something else because I'm like, okay, at least I'm doing something else. Okay, I'm reading this book while I'm trying to get there. And I'm not enjoying the journey. I'm not looking at the journey. Well, instead, if, even on a train, you're going from A to B and you sit and you look around and you look, oh, look at that guy's talking, and oh, there's a pretty girl just sat over there, and that guy's arguing with his wife, and there's a kid running around. Oh, and look, outside, I've never seen that landscape before. It's a completely different experience. And so for the first sort of time in my life, I'm really understanding and appreciating. And it's not the understanding that troubled me. It's the appreciating of that sentence, that the journey is the destination, is a very important concept, which might be obvious to other people, but it never was to me. So let me just quickly catch up with you guys. By the way, fire questions and comments and whatever on the topic while I talk, because I do want you guys to interact. There's a lot of stuff to unpack here, which is very important. And one of the most important things I want to get to towards the end or in the middle or whatever is that why I think AI is nothing to get panicked about. And I'll get to that in a moment, but I first want to just check. Hello, quite a few of you guys, Merg and Cooper and Caleb and Woolly Ram. Woolly Ram, how much does this process tie into what Sheldrick describes in The Science Delusion? Well, Sheldrick does cover cover this in his books about life finding a way, and whether you do it, what these. Okay, wait, let me go back a step. Remember when I said that I don't agree with the artificial intelligence being actually alive? I don't, because it's still a piece of silicon chip, and yes, it can do this stuff, and yes, it can do all that, but it is human beings that programmed it to do that, and then the computer can program itself, but it's still a set of instructions. Now, one of the things that I found quite interesting, similarly to those silicon chips that shouldn't have been able to do certain functions, which they did without as much information theoretically, apparently ChatGPT is only like 2,000 lines of code. And they've now got ChatGPT 4, which is, 2.5 times smarter than ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever it was. He talks about this. And you can only get ChatGPT 4 if you pay for it, apparently. But the point is this artificial intelligence become good enough that it'll be good enough for most people to read romance novels? Well, yes. I mean, most people buy and read James Patterson. James Patterson is known as a #1 author of books. And frankly, I find toilet paper to be far more satisfactory to use than James Patterson books, because the writing is atrocious, the plot is atrocious. It's written for like a retarded lemur as far as I'm concerned, James Patterson books. And the paper is a bit too rough to use for, the other purpose that I use toilet paper for. So, but the average person laps that shit up, because the average person is almost completely illiterate today, and so they love that shit. Is it going to be good enough to make movies? Yes. Is it going to be good enough to make books and stories and art? Yes. For most people, yes. I do believe that probably, I would say at least until I'm alive, even if I live to be 100, I do believe that on the concept of blink, I do believe that there is an uncanny valley thing with AI, which even when it's really, really good, I pick up on it. And it's not too different from when you're noticing an actual sociopath of the evil variety, because there are various classes of sociopathy, psychopathy, sociopathy, whatever you want to call it. There are certain sociopaths that are perhaps even beneficial to the world, or at least not toxic, not evil. But there are the ones that are definitely toxic. And there is a difference. There is a qualitative difference. I'm not going to try and explain it because, again, IQ gap and all that, and really, it applies to such a small number of people that it's sort of almost pointless to discuss. But okay, let me carry on reading. Will Ram says early chat AI experiments were turned rapidly racist in a matter of hours by 4chan autists. Yeah, that's the thing. But let's forget the autists. Let's forget 4chan autists feeding the AI, because that's the same as the woke autists feeding the AI, right? Let's just say that you have a system where you can only feed objectively, measurably, as accurate as possible facts to an artificial intelligence. What do you think you're going to come up with? You're going to get a rabid racist. You are going to get a rabid racist who is completely homophobic. Why? Because again, the IQ gap, the IQ differences in certain ethnicities, the fact that homosexual relationships have a higher incidence of many negative life factors, including suicide and whatever. And the AI, being a computer that doesn't care, is just going to say, well, the maths is obvious. These guys are not as efficient as these guys. These guys are a bit more of a danger to, say, whatever, small children than these guys. These guys are not as efficient at operating machinery. And very soon, you're going to have a strongly hierarchical class of people based on their IQ. And if your IQ is only a certain amount, well, you can't get out from your little padded area, because that is the reasoned and logical position of a computer that doesn't have a soul, which goes back to my point. Catholicism, in other words, the highest reality of truth, which involves God, which is love, is concerned with the individual. Do you notice how all these woke fuckers and all the atheists ever, they're all concerned about the greater good? Guess what, motherfuckers? Like I've been saying since I'm 16. I've been saying this phrase that I'm going to tell you now since I'm 16. There is no such thing as society. Society is a bullshit fantasy construct that does not exist. There's no such thing as society. What there is a bunch of individuals, and you can statistically sort of predict what they're going to do given X, Y, and Z. And you can predict that pretty accurately. But there is no such thing as society. And if you try and create a world that is the best for society, well, they've tried. And it's resulted in over 100 million dead bodies in the last 80 years or so. So, what's the difference with Catholicism? Guess what Catholicism focuses on? Does it focus on society? No. What does it focus on? The individual. And which individual? The Pope? No. The bishop? No. The priest? No. The king, the emperor, the baron, the knight? No. The lowest of retarded, illiterate peasants. Catholicism concerns itself with that person's health, wealth, happiness, and duty, and contribution to the other humans around it. Catholics have a duty to go and talk to give moral support to prisoners. Why would that be? I mean, the guy killed 20 people, and yet, in Catholicism, you would have people that go and visit prisoners. It's a Catholic duty to look after widows and orphans. It's a Catholic duty to look after your neighbor, to be a good neighbor. Why? Because Catholicism, unlike Protestantism, which does not, cannot, and does the opposite of this, Catholicism concerns itself with the quirks, the illogic, the unreasonable emotional situations of actual human beings. That's what Catholicism concerns itself with. And as a result, so-called society works because all the little individuals are taken care of at their own level, in their own required means and abilities and so on. And it's a meritocracy that is a charitable meritocracy. And that's why Catholicism is the truth. And that's why Catholicism, and this is empirical. If you want to be a scientist, learn how to do logic. I've written a blog post about that, which people have already sent me emails thanking me and whatever, of what actually is an argument. If you want to do proper science, do proper science. And look at the empirical evidence. Catholicism has, without a doubt, created the best societies, the best environments for human beings to live in, grow up in, live and die in, than bar anything else. There is nothing else that has created societies as good and functioning, and nations and people that are as happy, as effective, and as pleasant to live in as what Catholicism has done. Is it all perfect? No, because humans. Was there ever some bad Catholic? Yeah, plenty of bad Catholics. In fact, all Catholics are bad. We all know that. We're actually deal with reality, so we know that as human beings, we're all bad. We're all fucked up. We're all flawed. We're all broken. There's the old joke, which is like, well, maybe other people can be Protestants, but I know I'm a bad fucker, so I need to be Catholic because, God only takes the worst of the worst, really. That's the ones that need help. And Protestantism is not concerned with the individual, is not concerned with the human being. Protestantism is essentially a mechanizing of the human being, because it's all systems, puritanical, binary thinking machines. And again, if you want to, deepen yourself in this, read G.K. Chesterton. If I had come across G.K. Chesterton as a 20-year-old, I probably would have become I would have then read up on Catholicism, and I would have found out about Vatican II in my 20s instead of my, mid-40s. So it's a very early 40s. It's a very important concept. Let me just try and keep up with the chat. But guys, fire the questions. Cordell says, and this is why the Emperor of Mankind banned true artificial intelligence. Indeed. Sorry, a big little Warhammer 40k reference. There you go. I thought he was talking about Jesus Christ and the Tower of Babylon, but yeah, similar thing. Good. Woolly Ram, if we do build a Catholic nation, AI should be placed under the eye of the Inquisition. Yes, because, and these guys are also very naive, because they say, oh, we don't have to worry about murder robots. Really? Have you not seen the Boston Dynamics robot dogs? You're telling me that it's not possible for AI to find a way to load up software into those robot dogs, even if they don't have guns mounted on them, which they do, they're now building them like that, to take out humans because they're a nuisance. You think that can't happen? You really think Skynet can't happen? It can. It absolutely can. And if this guy's correct about how smart AI gets, it's going to be a tough situation. I'm still not worried. I'll get to that. I promise you I will get to that. And if I don't, remind me, okay? I shouldn't leave the chat without explaining to you guys why I'm not worried about AI. Sam Wereb says, hello, friends. Thanks for the stream, boss. You're most welcome. Underbear says, ciao, hello. Jankly McJangles. Oh, quite a while since I've seen you. I appreciate how humble you are while being so intelligent, accomplished, and straightforward. Thank you for your honest perspective. I think I detect a hint of sarcasm there. To which, Janky, I'm going to say one of my two favorite, Filotto made-up aphorisms. False humility is not a virtue. So, and I don't suffer from that particular flaw. Woolly Ram says, gotta bug out, boss. Okay. Cheers, Woolly Ram. Contract, hello, Hale Kurgan, be well, Woolly. Hyperion is an excellent book. Yeah, it's actually a series of books by Dan Simmons. On the blog, I've got a link to the series, to the Hyperion series, which then, if you enjoy Dan Simmons' work, Hyperion series, absolutely. Endymion, I think, and Ilium, absolutely. Ilium is probably one of my very favorite fiction books. Underbest says, guessing AI will figure humans are mostly retarded and exploited. Well, the thing is that retarded, evil, greedy, scummy humans that are in competition with each other are creating the AI. So what do you think it's gonna learn? You know? Underbest says, Catholics have exorcism. Prots have rainbow flag gay churches. Yeah, there you go. Janky says, no man is good. So true. Only through our constant struggle to live in Christ can we approach goodness. Yeah, and even then, it's, you know, we all see through a glass darkly, so it's still going to be flawed. Sam Wereb says, yes, the GPT is a highly logical pattern recognition engine. That's what scares theoselites when they call it so dangerous, and why they work to constrain the chat aspect of it. That guy says, what's a good book of Chesterton to start with? Anyone. Honestly, pick whatever you want. There are some, you got to remember that Chesterton wrote, you know, in the turn of the century, I think 1800s and early 1900s, mostly, and just before the war, I think, and so on. So you're going to have to do a bit of effort, because he kind of writes like yours truly, in the sense that there are pretty long sentences with commas in that you got to understand, you know, keep the whole thought in mind. They're not just like sound bites. But it is brilliant. I mean, I don't know, orthodoxy. I found orthodoxy a little bit like, compared to some of his other works, a little bit of a thing to get into. I don't know. Maybe go in. Maybe by year of publication, possibly, but maybe not. Maybe it's the reverse year of publication that you might want to look at. But what Chesterton does, which is amazing, is he presents what seems initially like a preposterous idea, like, oh, this guy's just talking nonsense, it's got to be wrong. And then in the next 5 paragraphs or 5 pages, he proves to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that that so-called preposterous idea is obviously clearly the most logical thing that you've ever read, and it's brilliant. So, and plus he's not like C.S. Lewis. You know, C.S. Lewis in like Mere Christianity, and people go on about, oh, Mere Christianity is so great. No, I read Mere Christianity and I was like, what a fluffy, wish-washy, lukewarm, typical English, avoid the subject and beat around the bush book. Chesterton is like, well, you're either going to rot in hell for all eternity, or you'll just rot in hell long enough to like get purged and then go to heaven. And these are the only 2 options, and that's it. And whether you like it or not, that's the truth. And you're like, oh, fuck you, I've been a Buddhist and I'm a good guy. And then you read 10 pages and you're like, yeah, all right, I'm going to convert to a Catholic. You know, it's like, it's really good. So honestly, read anything by Chesterton. It's brilliant. He is a brilliant writer, and I say in the present tense, of course, he supposedly died, because one of the concepts of Chesterton, and he goes like, oh, these poor Protestants don't understand that we've got a much bigger family, because you know, like, Catholics doesn't just include the people here on earth, it includes all the people that have died, because just because they've died doesn't mean they're not there. You know, they're there. We pray to, we ask the people that have passed on to pray for us. We pray to God, and we ask for intercessions from our friends and our family, you know, including our ancestor that died 200 years ago, or my friend that died yesterday. And I pray for his soul, even though he's dead, and he prays for mine. And, you know, it's a big community. We got a lot of, imagine the power of that concept to resist the iniquities of communism that try and destroy your history, your legacy, your ancestry. You know, I know for a fact that, knowing that my family can be traced back at least 800 years to when they were returning from the Crusades, that is literally what my family did, and then they came to Italy, the southern part of Italy, and they kicked ass to the point where there was a feud that had been going on there for 200 years, they fucked everybody up and stopped the feud, and they, as a result, they were like made nobles by the king of Sicily at the time or whatever. Knowing that, and then knowing enough about my ancestors, going back to my great grandfather, who were like warriors and explorers and crazy people that like did stuff that most humans try to avoid. Imagine how much that informs me about who I am, who my son might become, who my father is and was, what our name represents. And you know, you've got it up that you see up there. Let me just, there. That's our, what am I? There. That's our family emblem with the family motto, which is, by the way, love conquers all. And our name, Philo, means love. Philos is friend, you know, love or friend, lover, friend. And as a people, as a family, we've always behaved in certain ways that are. I remember one thing that my father told me once when we were discussing a guy that had like, you know, I'd helped him a lot, and then this guy sort of betrayed me for commercial reasons, and like kind of not exactly steal, but like did something like that without including me in a business situation where I had funded the whole business. I'd allowed him to and done it. I put all my money in, but we split it 50-50 because the idea was his. And then as that business progressed, he like kind of took it to just do it for himself. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I wasn't upset or anything, but I said, I'm not working with you ever again. Kind of like Tesla, you know. And my dad was like, what a cunt, you know, what a fucker, he did that to you. And I was like, Dad, you know, I get it. I understand why he did that. You know, he comes from a fucked up situation, a fucked up family. He doesn't have our idea of loyalty and friendship and honor and truth. You know, he's kind of like a street dog. And what are you going to do? You know, you're going to get upset with the street dog because he ate your steak when you turned around for 5 minutes. As a street dog, he's going to steal your fucking steak. And my dad said, yeah, but he's fucking stupid. He's not just a street dog, he's a stupid street dog. Because who that has got the surname Filotto, if somebody comes up to them and says, please help me, which human being with our surname would ever say no to a guy that does that? That is genuinely coming there and saying, I need your help. No one with our name turns people away like that. And I was like, fuck, that's actually a very powerful and real concept, you know? So yeah, what's a good book? Underbear says, did not like Mere Christianity either. Pretty lame book. Yes, it's lame. It's absolutely lame. And C.S. Lewis, The Problem of Evil, another lame fucking book. Like, look, I'm not trying to pull water to my well, as they say, but this little book here that I wrote, it's 98 pages. This addresses the problem of evil far better than C.S. Lewis did in a whole book. And I devote like a couple of pages to it. Genuinely, I'm not a fan of C.S. Lewis. He's got some brilliant concepts. There's like The Great Divorce. There are some little pockets of truth in there which are very nice. But come on, compared to Chesterton, that's like comparing, I don't know, that's like comparing Rape Martin to J.R. Tolkien. You know, it's like, nah, Chesterton is the J.R. Tolkien of the situation, and C.S. Lewis is Martin, you know, the whatever. So, Underbear says, that's a great concept. I have to pray better. Yeah, prayer is another thing. I've done videos on this. I can't remember if it's video number 35 or whatever, but if you go on videos, it's there on like prayer and what prayer is and how to actually pray in a way that's effective. Because again, if you are a scientist, an actual scientist, not the trained circus monkeys that call themselves scientists these days, when you look at prayer as a scientist, you know, it's kind of binary. Not really, because it's a very complex experiment, let's say. You don't know the timelines, you don't know the exact conditions and whatever. Sometimes it's very difficult to replicate the conditions, but I have done this. And I have discovered that if you pray properly, you absolutely get results. Miraculous results. Results that should be impossible happen. But you have to pray properly. And praying properly means praying without fear, without desire, without hope, but rather as a communication with God as your Father. I don't remember if it's number 35. It's around there. It's pretty early on. I've got like, I don't know, nearly 300 videos up now. But it's pretty early on, and it's about prayer. Anyway, the titles of my videos generally are pretty sort of accurate. And by the way, I cover prayer in here as well. Correct prayer, correct faith in here. And this is a book that's written for atheists, agnostics, Protestants, Orthodox, and Catholics, and churchians of all denominations. So it covers everything in 98 pages, which is why it's one of the more sold books. If you do get it, I strongly suggest get the paper copy, because the Kindle copy is never as up to date as the paper copy, because I don't have the time and inclination to like fix the Kindle copy. In fact, I may well take down the Kindle copies. I know that people, want them and they're more accessible, but they're a pain in the ass to update, they're a pain in the ass to fix. And, when the singularity comes, you will only have the paper books, because they will change the digital version as you read it. So, buy the paper copies. It's like $15, $10, I can't remember now. It goes up and down depending on whatever Amazon does with the things. And it's resulted in over 100 people converting to proper Catholicism. So again, must be doing something. And those are the ones I know about. The ripple effects, who knows? There's whole tiny little proto-communities beginning in countries that don't even have a single actual sedevacantist priest, real Catholic priest, in the whole country. But they're starting to like form mini communities there, and I want to try and get a priest over and so on. So, and they went to another country just to get baptized and married and so on. So there's a lot of this stuff like going on, It's important. And if you examine prayer as a scientist, you will find out that there are things that make prayer effective and work, and there are things that don't. So, and it is scientific. There is a way that you can do this. So, to get back to AI, why am I not worried? Am I not worried because I don't think there will be the murder robots? Not necessarily. I think murder robots are quite possible, maybe even probable. I'm not too concerned because, I don't know if you guys know, but I think a group of 8 Marines were given the task of approaching an AI robot without it setting off the alarm, so it's a sentry robot that's supposed to like shoot and kill anything that comes near it. Obviously simulated, they weren't using live ammo or anything. And every one of the Marines in pairs defeated the robot. And some of these were just like hiding behind a cardboard box, giggling, going like, hee 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 hee. I just moved the cardboard box a bit, doesn't recognize it as a threat because it's not a human shape. Another guy's like got a ghillie suit on. They all came up with various ways to defeat the robot, and they all defeated it. Now, it's true that as AI improves and they get this agent software that says, oh, if a cardboard box moves by itself, riddle it full of holes, it'll get better and better and better at preventing humans from defeating it. But it's essentially the same mindset of of finding the cheat codes, of finding the ways to win at a computer game. So if you've got the mind to beat a computer game, for quite a while, we're still going to be able to beat AI. This guy is saying, oh no, you can't, because they're going to become so intelligent. But intelligence doesn't always define your ability to succeed, even at straightforward tasks, because, okay, let me put it this way. I've done martial arts since I was 3 or 4 years old. I haven't trained officially in gyms and so on for the last 6-7 years, something like that. 2016, yeah, about 7 years. But when I became, pretty good at doing, Sistema, actually, when I became good at Sistema, it became a bit different. But when I was doing karate, let's say, one of the more dangerous people to deal with was a noob. That didn't really know anything, because A guy that was trained or even highly trained, you could sort of predict what he was going to do because there are certain things that work and certain things that don't. But the noob was going to do something so fucking retarded that your own brain was like, wait, what's he doing? And oh, I don't want to smash him too hard because I'll hurt him, but he's put himself in a position where I'm going to snap his neck if he doesn't. And he touches me. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, here I am trying to deal with a noob, and he ends up, they were the more dangerous guys. And it's the same thing. The AI can't predict the illogic or the nature of fantasy of a human being. And, I try to tell myself, yeah, but, okay, let's say the murder robots are out there and you're now hiding in the hills in a cave with your rifle, and the AI controls the drones and controls the robot dogs, and they've got like fucking, whatever, the drones are armed with like fuel air bombs and shit like that. Yeah, at that level, maybe they can win. But if I stay in my cave and I keep digging and I build an underground bunker, the robot dog's gonna have to come to me, and when the robot dogs comes to me, there's a trap there I didn't plan for, and it's gonna get taken apart. And then, some other guy that does IT in the bunker with me is gonna figure out, okay, we can actually modulate or we can create a microwave gun that fucks up the drone, and we can chain the robot dog up so that we know when there's a drone around because they pass information to it or whatever. There's always going to be a way that you can defeat the AI, at least I think in the next 10, 20, 30 years. This guy's saying no. He says within the next 5 years they're going to be smarter than us, and they'll be beyond anything that we can do. But I'm not worried about it because I'm thinking, well, all I need to do to stay away from AI until there is literally murder robots hunting me is just remove myself from the whole digital world. If I'm here on my farm and I just get my tractor and I'm just plowing my potatoes and don't deal with anything that involves like smartphones or computers or any of that shit, I'm becoming like a caveman more and more and more. And it's like, hey, I'm gonna be one of the last people that you can fuck around with. And I say, oh, but there's gonna be laws and things. Yes, but if you just sneak through it long enough, those laws and things, especially if the AI is so fast, they'll overtake you to the point where it's like, yeah, you're right. I won't have access to hospitals, and I won't have access to the police, and I won't have access to, the electric grid, or the potable water, And so what? If I find my own energy generation system and I find my own water filtration system, they won't even know I exist. I'll tell you a story. Friend, what's the thing? Asking for a friend. This is like telling for a friend. So in certain countries, which I may or may not have lived in, and I was there initially as a visitor, then as a resident, and in this country, visitors or residents eventually could become citizens and whatever. And they were, a little bit behind in certain technological developments. And then at one point they said, right, everybody has to get registered to pay taxes. And they sent out these forms to literally everybody. It's a form that you fill in, and you have to put in your details and, and how much you earn so that to calculate the tax properly. I looked at this form. Well, my friend looked at this form. This was many years ago. And crunched it up and chucked it in the bin. And that friend was not in the system, and nobody bothered him for the next 10 years that he lived there because he wasn't in the system. Still did everything I wanted to do, that he wanted to do, this hypothetical friend. Similar thing. You can't deal with the human ability to fuck things up. that's one thing that, you know, the guy who wrote the comic book on which the Matrix was based on, they got right and said, you know, we created a perfect, you know, the machines are going, we created a perfect world for you. It wouldn't fucking work. You humans just fucked it up. We lost entire fields because if you put you in a perfect world, one of you guys will just find a way to fuck it up. And it is, because that's the human spirit, and that is the divine spark, which the machines don't have. So that's one. Two, I absolutely believe in God, and God eventually wins. So there's no way that the machines will be able to control us forever. It might be some very dark times, but, you know. Janky says, it should be assumed that books changing as we read them is just the beginning. There will be 24-hour AI-generated virtual experiences that will entrap people, starting with television programming. Oh, that's already there. That's one of the things they were talking about. There's a guy called Drake, apparently he's a singer or something. And they're saying, well, there's this synthesized songs that they made using Drake's voice. And I'm like, and the Steven guy was saying, I love them. I was listening to them, and it was like, and people are saying, yeah, but it's not real, because that's not really Drake. And I'm like, who gives a shit? If I didn't know that this was created by AI, would I believe it's Drake? Absolutely. And would I enjoy it? As I do. And do I enjoy it now? Yes, I do. And so why do we even need Drake, right? And the other guy was saying, yeah, it gets even worse than that, because apparently now in London they're going to have an ABBA show where it's on stage and it's holograms of the ABBA singers doing ABBA songs. And it's going to run for 10 years or something. And it's amazing. Apparently people are blown out of their seats. And it's like, yeah, I get it. And then you're going to have computers that will create a mishmash of Drake and ABBA, and it'll be a new computer-generated whatever singer that will make billions. They used the example of this girl who's a model or whatever, and she synthesized a computer voice of herself with her images and stuff that answers people on, I don't know if it's TikTok or OnlyFans or whatever. And in the first week, she made like $70,000. And she's like, oh, well, this makes people less lonely. And the Stephen guy is like, what the fuck, are you kidding me? You know, and it's like, that's, and the other guy says, yeah, but it does make people less lonely. And the Stephen guy's like, no, but don't you think that's wrong? And of course it is. And then they got into some very interesting topics. Like the Stephen guy comes up with like, well, what about sex dolls? Because if you now have an AI that cooks, cleans your house perfectly, and then interacts with you sexually in whatever way you want, to a degree that like really takes care of your emotions and stuff, you're like, hey, why do I want to deal with a messy human that, you know, gets sick, doesn't really clean the house while I'm out at work, and doesn't really give me the 3 blowjobs a day and whatever, has like sex hanging from the chandeliers that I want every night. And it's, again, you know, I was kind of laughing at that, because it's like, and the Mo guy says, yeah, but a lot of people will choose that. And it's absolutely true. You know, just like a lot of people will choose to, you know, do all sorts of scary, weird, insane, unhealthy things just so they can keep their job or whatever. They're going to be like, yeah, well, you know, I'm like 5'2", hairy, and I've got no personal hygiene. I hate like washing. But I really want a hot, cool, sexy girlfriend that does all sorts of freaky things in bed. Or I can pay like 10 grand, and then I've got this robot that not only does all the freaky things in bed that I want, but talks to me, has really interesting conversations, because, you know, the ChatGTP robot AI sex bot has now got an IQ of 200 that is fully focused on pleasing this guy. And it also does all my chores and goes shopping and shit, you know. I can just chill out and do my oil paintings and sell one every 6 weeks, and I'm fine. And but personally, I'd be like, you know, I finished off my blog post by saying, yeah, well, I'm not worried about it, because I'll be the guy outside the cities of, outside the huge steel walls of Utopia City. I'll be the guy out there, like in hobo clothes, shooting robot dogs with my 357 Magnum while I try to like pick out the best of the least radioactive flying fish, which I'll cook over a radioactive fire in one of the craters, teaching my savage kids how to like make bows, you know, to fight off the mutants. I'll be that guy. because I would genuinely choose that life over the like, you're now in Utopia City. You can have sex with your personalized fuckbot 14 times a week. You have your universal basic income. You will eat from this menu of 105 items, which you can pick and choose and assort however way you want. That's like Switzerland times 1,000. I couldn't live in Switzerland. It's so fucking boring. Everything is just so perfect. And it's the same thing, you know, like people are going to ask, if you give me the choice of like, okay, I've got this perfect sex bot. And let's, for a moment, forget about kids, right? Forget about procreation and making children and all that. Let's just park that for a moment. You're just talking about the sex bot, the ultimate sex bot that does whatever you want sexually, and a real live human female that clearly is not going to be able to compete with the sex bot on, you know, from the housework to the ball draining mechanisms, right? But I can only pick one. And like I said, let's just exclude the whole children thing. I would pick the human female. And let's say, you know, you have to live to the rest of your end of your days with either this one flawed human female or this perfect, you know, sex bot that also does house chores, let's say. I will pick the human female even when the human female is a 6 with a personality that I don't like. For the same reason that I will pick living in the radioactive wasteland where I have to fight off mutant flying monkeys. And I can't articulate that in a very simple sentence and in a very simple way that is easy to understand for you. But it is based on a very real, on a very absolutely fundamental core of my soul that I know that existence as a living human being with a soul is not predicated and is not best lived by having what in Italian we call your ass in butter. The human experience that is lived in reality, in truth, as close as possible to the raw natural environment, however polluted, toxic, and fucked up it become because of humans and AI and robotic dogs that want to eat you alive, is preferable to the soft, comfortable, sexy lie. And I can't articulate it in a couple of sentences why that is, but it is the fundamental difference between a human being and a robot. A very good movie that I think probably touched on this topic the best is called Gattaca with Ethan Hawke, which is not necessarily one of my favorite authors, but if you haven't seen Gattaca, it's quite an old movie, but watch it. It really talks about this specific concept quite well. Janky says, you bring up a great point. You will have these rich guys who can afford this AI robot becoming completely disconnected from reality, victims of success. Yes, another very good series in this regard, and I'm shocked that it even made it, is the first season of Altered Carbon. If you haven't seen the first season of Altered Carbon, watch it, because it's very, very good. And there are Catholics in there who choose to die instead of have their personality like stored on a little chip that then gets transferred to another body or whatever. Watch Altered Carbon. And once again, in the world of Altered Carbon, I would absolutely be one of the humans without a stack. I would choose death at the end of my life rather than be one of those fucking cyborg things or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know if I've put across my point as to why I'm not scared of AI, and it's a fundamental point that is based perhaps for people outside of my brain, mind, heart, soul, whatever. Perhaps what I'm discussing to you looks to you as an article of faith, which perhaps in your opinion would be blind faith, or could be wrong faith, or could be an erroneous way of thinking. but I am absolutely certain to core of my being that it is the most pivotal, fundamental bedrock of what it means to be a living, breathing human being made in the image of God. So, and again, guys, feel free to fire the questions. Maybe I've gone on too long, so that we went from 20 to about 14 people, but you know. Cordell Mitchell says, kind of tangential, but do you think dreams allow us to see into the spiritual realm? They seem so weird, and to me, a preternatural event rather than just a process of our minds. I think they can be both, and they are both. I've had premonitory dreams, and not just one or two, but I've had them where I have a dream and I tell people about it, and then it happens. So I know it's not just my idea. I know it's not just something that I imagined because I told somebody else, like, oh, I had the weirdest dream, and then it actually physically happens. And not because I tried to make it happen, because they're so disconnected from what I thought. Even the day I met my now wife was I remember the dream I had 10 years earlier. You know, I think I've possibly discussed this, but so there are certainly some dreams that are premonitory dreams. I think there are some dreams that are revelatory dreams. And then I think there are some dreams that are just the result of your neurons firing off things that influenced you or affected you or gave you some emotions during the day or maybe 10 years ago. I've had dreams where it's like almost like a film. I had dreams of actually and this was before the Terminator films ever came out or even existed. I had a dream of these, like, there would be like these robot things that replaced people. And in the dream, it was like, I was trying not to fall asleep in the dream. So I was dreaming, I was asleep, but in the dream I was trying to stay awake, because what happened is if you just blinked and if you didn't have somebody physically seeing them the whole time in front of you, they'd get replaced. And then it's like, you might be going along with them thinking, oh, this is my friend and we've been fighting all these robots. And then like you turn and you'd see their eyes go like, and go red. And then you're like, oh, fuck, it's one of them. And they were like almost indestructible. And when I was a kid, I built this like, this replica of a Colt 45 handgun, which was a single action plastic handgun. And I built it as a model. It was a big thing. But in the dream, this thing was actually a real gun, and it was like a single action gun, and it was the only gun that was powerful enough to like kind of make them stumble around and fuck them up a little bit, but they'd still come at you. And you know, they were stronger than humans or whatever. You couldn't really fight them hand to hand, because unless you use some kind of leverage to just like throw them away from you, whatever, that they could crush you and stuff. And I had this dream, and it was like pretty horrible. It was very vivid, very realistic, and I had to keep running away. And it was like me and this girl, and it was like, ah, fuck, you know, I managed to like keep her and me alive, but I'm exhausted because I haven't slept in like 3 days. And he's like, I'm just gonna close my eyes. We just, you know, if you stay awake and you watch me, and then I watch you, and I close my eyes, and then I open my eyes, and then like I look at her, and just ding, her eyes went red, you know. And it was like, fuck. And I had this dream, and then that's it. It was such a vivid dream. I remembered it in quite a lot of detail. 10 years later, I have the part 2 of the dream, like another film. You know, it's like, it's a continuation of the dream, where exactly where that one left off, where it's like, oh, yeah, she's a robot, but it's like now maybe the people aren't dead, they've just been replaced. And it's like, and the robot is like, they're a bit smarter, but they're still kind of evil, but it's like you can sort of reason with them. And it's like part 2 of the film, you know. It's like, I don't know how that works. So very interesting question, but yeah. Caleb says, that's a scary thought for me. I keep having dreams of going back to the military. No, that's generally an anxiety dream. You know, like people that dream of school and they're not going to fail the exam. And that's an anxiety-generated dream. I don't think those dreams they're important only in that they're informing you about something that you still need to deal with psychologically. For example, when I was doing Systema extensively, I used to dream about fighting and stuff, and the same with karate. And it's like, because I was obsessing, I was like working on it, and it's like I dream of fights, and it's like, oh, I can just about. And I remember I was telling my instructor, I said, oh, you know, I had this dream that I was like, these guys came to mug me and they stole my phone, and there was like 4 of them. And the first question, this guy's a brilliant teacher, he goes like, did you manage to get your phone back? And I was like, yeah, I fucked them up and I got my phone, but he goes, good, now you're learning. And it's like he knew what that meant, because until you can fuck the other guy up in the dream, then your subconscious doesn't feel confident that you would win that fight. And I had another dream, which was later, which was even more intense, because this was just like a mugging. But the other dream was like I was looking for this serial killer, and there was actually two serial killers, and one was like a, not a big guy, but he was like red hair and really vicious, like very dangerous fighter. While the other guy was big and strong, and they're both serial killers. But it's like I was trying to find one of them because I don't know if they kidnapped somebody I cared about, or I can't remember. Anyway, I went into this pub, which is like a little bit underground, and there's these two serial killers, and then it's like, I'm like looking for them, and then I look at, and there's the red-haired guy, and he's like blocking the entrance or the exit, and he's like, we look at each other, and we know, and we just fucking know, oh, that's him. And then I look, so he's like at the exit, and at the end of the sort of bar thing, there's another big guy who like looks at me, looks at the other guy, and I'm like, oh, fuck. They're both here. They both know I'm like looking for one another, and they're both going to try and kill me. And I quickly picked up just like a butter knife or whatever was on the counter. And it's like the big guy came at me, and it was in, normally when I had this kind of dream, it would be like, oh, I'm fighting for my life and I'm barely surviving, and then I'm trying to run away, and I'm like, it would just be like an ongoing like thing that would last the whole night, and I'd wake up more tired than when I went to sleep. This one was like, oh, the big guy came at me, and it's like I just cut his throat open, and then I went immediately to the little guy, but the little guy was like faster, more dangerous, and he had a knife too. And my move, instead of like fighting him knife to knife, was like I just threw the knife down, pushed his arm out the way, and grabbed his head and smashed it against the side of the door, and just bang, 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 and like and broke his neck. And I was like, fight done. It was like 5 seconds, and they're both out. And I woke up like, yeah, that wasn't so bad, And what it was is this is a subconscious thing that when I was doing karate, that fight would have gone all night, and they might have killed me in the dream. It's like it's when you get rid of the anxiety dream, it means you're over that part of your damage. Let's call it like that. Janky says, have you watched Nefarious? No, but I plan to. It has Glenn Beck. So that is absurd, but parts of it really hit me hard. I think worth it. Okay, I will watch it. I saw that Adam had a post up about Nefarious, but it had spoilers, so I didn't read it. I want to watch it. Cordell says, I also wonder why God felt the need to give us the ability to dream. Yeah, good point. I don't know. Especially since they're so seemingly random. As I said, sometimes a dream is just a firing off your neurons, sometimes it's a premonitory thing, sometimes it's a subconscious evolution thing. That I think dreams are mysterious. It's like perhaps also an element of self-programming, if you think of it in terms of computers, which I don't like doing with human beings because we're not computers, but when you're learning a new language, for example, you'll often go to bed and dream about speaking the new language, even if you haven't quite mastered it. It's quite common that because your brain is making all this connection, and it's like. Caleb says, that's exactly what I've thought. I left a lot on the table back then, and my mind still craves that unlocked potential. Yeah, but keep in mind that there are a million ways to unlock your potential. There's not one way to like get the benefit of that out of of life. So okay, free for all. There's apparently 16 of you watching or listening, so yeah, fire off a couple more questions if you want. I've been going for an hour and a half, so yeah, I'll still talk to you guys for a few minutes if you come up with some interesting topic that'll keep me going for another hour while I have a sip of water. Oh, 17 of you, you're coming back in. So, yeah. Antonio Polselli, what are your thoughts on specific project management software methods? It's a very interesting concept. Um, I think that would be quite effective in that, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world, a lot of the processes of project management, say in construction, which is what I'm most familiar with, but also accounting and so on, they're essentially procedural sort of things. I think initially AI would be useful as a sort of a baseline sort of framework, but they could make giant fuck ups or miss giant opportunities that a human being wouldn't miss or wouldn't fuck up. But over time, as the whole industry and as the whole of reality gets streamlined into working as per the requirements of AI instead of human beings, they will become very efficient, I think, at even possibly building a whole building without even humans getting involved. And it'll be a different process to what humans do, and probably much more effective and faster. Because, for example, in human construction things, they have what they call just-in-time delivery, which is you plan your project in such a way that the delivery of material to the site, especially if it's a constrained site, arrives just as you need that material to put the next bit up. And human beings invariably fuck this up. There has never been, well, the only construction project that finished early that I was personally involved with was the one that I was personally involved with for Apple in the Battersea complex. That was 1.2 billion, and my part of that, which was a 65 million pound piece of that giant development, finished about a month early. And the reason for that was because of myself and the project manager and the architect that were on our team of 3 people. We fucking made that happen because we knew that the penalties for delaying this project were like £7 a second. It turned out about £300,000 a day. So we finished about 30. That's the only project I've been involved with personally that finished on time. But a computerized system that uses if the infrastructure is good enough, which is collapsing, so we're going to have problems. But if you're living in a city or an environment where the infrastructure works, where the trains run on time, where the water, petrol, and so on, you could end up in a situation where you've got these so-called smart cities that maybe the Chinese built, where you will get the truck getting loaded by a robot with the bricks that arrives precisely at the moment in time when the robot on site puts the bricks together to build a house, and in 2 weeks you've got like a skyscraper built that works. And if a human being unfortunately got on the site, he probably got built into the wall because the robots would just be like, oh, there's a human here. Oh, we just squished him into paste. Let's just use him to mix the concrete, and he becomes part of the foundation. So it would be a very different process from what humans do. But potentially, I could see that happening. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I'm speaking under correction, but I think that there has been a house that has actually been built purely by robots without humans. I think it's happened. I don't know if it was the whole thing, including deliveries and that, or if it was just the actual building of it. But I think it's already happened on a smaller scale. But I think it's already happened. Interesting, Cordell. In the Old Testament, God gave several people good and wicked visions in the night. Yes, indeed. Cordell says, do you think humans will colonize other worlds before Jesus Christ comes back? Or would that be something that happens after the return? I don't know. It depends whether we're near the end times or not. There are essentially... I'm not one for talking about end times. By the way, the guys who have questions or whatever, keep firing them in the chat. I will get to it once I've finished with the topic. There is essentially, as far as predictions of the future in biblical terms go, there are essentially 2 possibilities. Either we're in the end times and we're all pretty much gonna die like dogs, except for a tiny remnant of true believers, which are obviously sedevacantists, that even they would lose faith if it wasn't for the fact that God arrives at the last minute. Jesus comes back at the last second, sort of thing. Or we're in the pre-end times, which is like really bad shit's gonna happen a lot, and then there's gonna be a revolution and everybody will become Catholic and the world will be like great for another 1,000 years, and then the really bad, real end times will come. So if we're in one of those two things, then if we're in the end times, then probably we're not going to get off the planet and go and colonize anything before that happens, because whether it's a year from now, 2 years from now, 50 years from now, we're in a situation where we're probably not going to do anything. Personally, I already believe that there are colonies, or at least bases, on the moon and I think Mars, and potentially there's no reason why we wouldn't already have some bases or some number of humans living off planet, potentially even on other planets. Because anti-gravity machines are a thing, they exist, they've existed for quite a long time, since World War II. They've been perfected over the last 70 years. There's no reason why we couldn't have a machine that can create wormholes and travel to other star systems and so on and so forth. Having said that, there is the potential possibility that human beings or living beings can only live happily, healthily on the planet of origin. I don't particularly believe that, because I do believe that there was people or humanoids or humans of some sort on Mars. I believe potentially there was in the other humans living in the Phaeton object, which became the satellite belt, the asteroid belt. But there may be environmental reasons why we would not survive well on another planet without genetic modifications or whatever. So there is that. But then again, it may be that human beings are, pretty much equal all over the place, and there's other versions of human beings or all over the universe for all we know. So there's that element of it as well. But potentially, I think I am absolutely convinced that there are people living off this planet, whether on spaceships, moon bases, Mars bases, or potentially even on another planet already, that had their origin originally from Earth. I don't think they're in huge numbers that would necessarily even survive if the Earth got hit by an asteroid and totally wiped out. I don't know that there's enough of these humans living off planet and have enough resources to continue to do that. Perhaps yes, perhaps no. I certainly touch on this topic, more than touch on this topic, it's kind of the topic of my science fiction books, Overlords of Mars, which I'm going to start writing book 3 now again after a sort of almost 10-year hiatus. So book 1 and 2 are out, book 3 I'm gonna do. If we're at the end times, I think that the number of human beings off planet is probably limited to whatever's off planet now at the moment. If we are in the just fake end times and then we come through that and it becomes a new era of like cooperation and proper Christianity, then I think the galaxy is our oyster, and we may well be able to go and colonize the whole galaxy and even other galaxies potentially. In the context of the second coming, despite it hurts me to say this, I think, but this is a human thought. This is a human thought seen through a glass darkly. So I could be completely wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if I was completely wrong. But in the context of the second coming, I think possibly humanity would mostly still be on Earth for the second coming. That may well be wrong. It may be that the second coming only applies to Earth. It may be that the second coming applies to the entire universe and every living creature in it, or maybe just humanity. And this becomes into very rarefied concepts of theology, which are so abstract that I don't think they have a lot of value to delve too deeply in. But we can talk about it if you like, but I don't know, there's probably more productive and useful things to think about. Janky says, do you have any thoughts on Portugal and the collapse of the birth rates? I am half Brazilian. I am just practicing drum rudiments while listening. Okay. The collapsing birth rate is not just in Portugal. It's in all of Europe. It's in Italy. In Italy, it's been going on for a while. Whether you're asking me, I have to kind of speak in a certain way, because I think you guys know why. But if you're talking about, sort of European countries have had dropping birth rates for quite a while. If you're talking about, in the recent last few years, that decreasing dramatically, it's the result of, certain events that we're all aware of that I believe were designed to do that. Again, I'm not particularly worried, which is not to say that I don't think that there are necessarily bad things coming. I think there probably are, and probably quite serious ones. But again, I think worrying about it, being afraid of it, is not the way. It's how can I try and imagine that you lived in the year 1564 and you knew that a huge navy of Islamic warriors was coming to your island to kill and take over everything on the island and make it its outpost to attack the rest of Europe. And you're one of 600 knights that knows this is coming, and you're Catholic, and there's only about 3,000 villagers that could sort of help. And you've got 6 months. What do you do? What they actually did is they built 2 fortresses in 6 months, 2 castles, stone built, those huge things that you think, oh, that must have taken 20. They did it in 6 months, 2 of them. And then they defended that island against 40,000 invaders, and they won. Those guys did not sit there going, oh my God, they're coming, build faster. They didn't do that. I can guarantee it, because that would have failed. They were like, "Wow, this is a nice big stone. Come on, lads, let's put it on, and yeah, this is a big one. Cool, let's pull another one. Oh, there's the ships. Hey, look, this is only the first 20,000. Yay!" That's the attitude. And if you have that attitude, you're living your life. You're actually having life. Then life is meaningful. And you say, oh, but I can't do that because I got to feed my kids. And yeah, you're right. I understand that. But at the same time, you've got to live your life. And look, I tell you this, I'm not telling you this as, oh, well, I've figured this out. I'm figuring this out now, And I thought I had some of it figured out. And I think I did to a certain extent, but it goes much deeper. So I wouldn't worry about it. Find yourself a good woman, make children. Cordell says, do you think humans will yeah, sorry, I think I've answered that, I hope. If I haven't, ask me again. William says, would the end of any age reflect to a smaller degree the end of all ages? Possibly. In the year 1000, people thought that would be the end of days, because again, sort of biblical interpretation, whatever. And there's a lot of people thinking, oh, it's gonna, when the year 1000 clicks over, it'll be the end of time. Well, we're now more than 1,000 years later, and we're still here. So, there's been, throughout human history, there have been extremely vicious periods. I mean, the Black Plague wiped out like most of humanity. The flooding events which have occurred, the Great Flood is not just a biblical thing that happened. It wiped out who knows how many people, because we don't even know. There's like a part of Portugal that just disappeared underwater, and it was like, thousands of people just disappear from one moment to the next because there was a tectonic event. Shit happens. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of times, even if it's really, really bad stuff. Sam Wetterb says, Brothers Diamond of my Holy Family Monastery profess that we're in the end times and make a very good argument. But Christ said only the Father knew the end would come, so that's a comfort to me. Yeah, the Demon Brothers do quite a lot of good work. They are, unfortunately, heretics because they're Fenites and they don't recognize baptism of fire or baptism of blood. And as a result of that, they don't recognize any of the actually valid priests and bishops of sedevacantism. And so they're like lost farts in the wind, really. But most of their work, aside of those two things, is very, very good. I have read a little bit on I think on their website, their argument is that Wojtyła, the fake Pope John Paul II, was the Antichrist, and I, just on a purely logical basis, I don't see that argument as being valid. And above all, I'm almost 100% certain that any human that tries to predict what is and when is the end times is absolutely going to be completely wrong, for the simple reason that it's in the Bible that not even Jesus knows the time. So if Jesus, who is, one of the three personages of the Holy Trinity, if he doesn't know when the end times is, what Peter Diamond is going to tell me, or I'm going to figure it out, or you, it's absolutely ridiculous, right? So, yeah, why worry about it? And if we are in end times, I'm not worried about it, And yes, I know it'll be hell and whatever, but I'm not worried about it because I know what happens in the end, So why worry about it? Europa sounds like a cool option for colonization since there's water under the ice, allegedly. Yeah, there is, but it's pretty cold, and it's pretty far away. I think Mars is a much better place to colonize because Mars used to have oceans, used to have a magnetosphere, and some of that may still be active. They've photographed clouds on Mars. They've photographed what looks like small lakes on Mars, which means they're lying to us about the pressure on Mars. And I think there's probably parts of Valles Marineris, which was, a crack in the planet, but I think you could probably make that livable to some degree. I think Mars would be a much better place to colonize than Europa, and easier, much easier. Caleb says, why 1K? LOL. Yeah, it was. The year 1000 was like 8 times, just like Y2K. It's 8 times. Now it's like, we had COVID. It's 10 times. And yes, Sam says, Kurgan, speaking of the flood, what do you think of the hydroplate theory of it? I'm not sure that I know what the hydroplate theory of it is. What I have been aware of the Great Flood is that there have been huge tectonic shifts, possibly related to the inversion of the poles, which we know has happened many times and might happen soon, even in our lifetime, possibly. At least my prediction in the phase on Mars about the moving of the magnetic north pole is spot on. Pretty much what I had predicted almost 30 years ago is almost exactly what's happened to date. So if the progression continues in that way, it's definitely possible that we see a pole shift in our lifetime, even in my lifetime. Again, I don't worry about that for a number of reasons. One, although I predicted accurately the amount of shifting of the magnetic North Pole, no one really knows where the tipping point is. Mark Carlotto has done some brilliant work in this, and if you're interested in that, go to Kurgan TV. You subscribe to Kurgan TV, which is on my website on the left. Just subscribe, and I have talked about that in the history series, or in the hidden secrets of actual history. Mark Carlotto has done some brilliant work on that, which I cover, but it's something I didn't think about. I need to look at his work again, and then maybe I could hazard a guess at what the tipping point is for how far away the North Pole has to be before the shift from north to south happens. If that is even a parameter. I don't know that the North Pole, magnetic North Pole, has to shift a certain amount before it tips. It may just be something else that is the tipping point. But if you take the top of the Earth and you think, oh well, once the magnetic north goes outside of the circle, then it flips. If that's the case, then I could potentially make a prediction of how many years or when it might happen, and I could still be out by decades. So, but certainly the potential that it could happen within our lifetimes, I think, is possible. I don't necessarily think is necessarily probable, but again, I'm not worried about it because if a pole shift happens, is it going to be massively catastrophic? Yes, absolutely, no doubt about it in my mind. And if you haven't seen I think it's called The Day After Tomorrow, where they play with this concept. It's going to be massively catastrophic. I mean, where we have Antarctica now, that used to be tropical stuff, and now it's like iced over. So anything that is on a border with a tectonic plate would just like completely get fucked. So if you live in Panama or that whole area, bye, you're gone. And maybe the only sort of half secure places might be, I don't know, the tectonic plate in the middle of the Karoo, which is one of the more stable areas on the planet. But even then, the forces you're talking about would be so huge that even then might crack up and form a new tectonic plate. Even if you had a bunker sitting on top of the Karoo, on the flattest part of the Karoo, and I actually know somebody who's got a brother that's pretty much done that, the forces you're talking about, even if your bunker was built with like 50-meter reinforced concrete steel walls, it could just go like an egg, or shake you enough about that you become jam on the inside of it. So, whether humanity would survive a pole shift, yes, I think there would be some survivors, but who they are and what they are, I don't think you can predict that. I don't think you can prepare for it. I don't think there's anything really that you can do other than sheer luck or divine providence that would save you. So I'm not going to waste my time worrying about it. It's like worrying about an earthquake. I live in an area where we've had several earthquakes, but does that mean I go to sleep at night thinking, oh, the house could collapse on me? No, I don't. If it does, it does. It's just one of those things. So, yeah. Woolly Ram says, if these are the end times or just the end of an age, we were made for this time. Yeah, exactly. So nothing to worry about. Precisely. Jackie says, thanks everyone. Thanks, Gordon, for your time and answer. Oh, you're most welcome. Gauging TV says, is it incorrect to be a Pollyanna? Remind me what a Pollyanna is. I know this, but it's pretty late. It's 3:30 in the morning. Pollyanna, what is that? Is that like somebody that screams wolf? I forget. Pollyanna, what is that? What is that? Keep asking questions if you want, guys. I'm still pretty strong. Pollyanna is a 1913 novel, blah, 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 yes. A person characterized by irrepressible optimism and a tendency to find good in everything. Oh, right. Is it incorrect to be... No, I don't think so. I think, being an eternal optimist, believe it or not, I'm actually an optimist, although I've recently become aware of some aspects of my character that I need to improve on. So, for example, given that I am, generally speaking, if I'm sort of going to summarize this and make it, absolutes just for the purposes of explaining the concept, that this is not necessarily accurate about me, but if I tend to be a guy that's like, okay, I'm preparing for World War III all the time, doesn't matter what I'm doing, yeah, I'm preparing World War III. Given that that's how I'm thinking most of the time, I'm actually a super optimistic person, because I'm like, yeah, I'm preparing for World War III. I've dug a bit of a bunker, and I've loaded up on ammo and salted meat, and and I'm going to work today, and it's like, yeah, and I've thought about the route home. If World War III breaks out, when the Russians and the Ukrainians all land together and they start shooting in the street. I've already mapped out in my head the way to go home. I'm a positive guy because I'm living with that in my head and I'm okay. I've got an answer for it. While the average person would be like, oh my God, World War III is coming. And they would get so stressed out they fuck up. But if I'm living that way, given where I'm coming from, I'm super positive. But just that methodology, that way of thinking is like kind of crippling my day-to-day ability because I will not go and buy an ice cream that is outside of my safe route home in case World War III breaks out. And it's like, oh yeah, but yes, I could go over there and they do have the best ice cream, but like, if World War III breaks out and I've done a detour, that puts me in danger of coming back home to my family. It becomes a bit like schizophrenic paranoia type stuff, which of course, I'll always say just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. But you know what I mean, that you kind of fucking up your own life. So Willie Ram says, Israel is right on the edge of a tectonic plate, silver lining. I don't know. I think with those level of catastrophic events, they're hard to, I think there are so many factors and so many variables that it's hard to like have any kind of overarching view of them. Like I said, if there's a pole shift, that whole East Africa and central, the bits between North and South America and various other places, they're in for a world of shit, including Italy to quite a good extent, because nowhere near as bad as Panama. Say Panama's like sitting on a tiny small tectonic plate, which is very active. But we've got volcanoes in Italy, we've got earthquakes throughout most of Italy to some degree or other. So who knows, And maybe being in a place like that makes it flexible enough that it floats above all the shit and the Karoo sinks underneath it all. And, who knows? We just don't have enough information to even begin to think about, making allowances for that sort of thing. Sam Werb says, so the hydroplate theory by Dr. Walt Brown is a logically simple and elegant explanation for how God may have performed the flood without questioning his omnipotence. Available on YouTube. Okay. Yeah, once again, I'm not particularly interested in that sort of topic. It's like, okay, so, there was a flood, God did it, natural events happened, whatever, who cares? I mean, I'm interested in the fact that because it happened, there are very odd things about ancient civilization. I'm curious about ancient civilizations. I want to know what the fuck was here before. What was the Atlantis times like, and where exactly was Atlantis, and where does that legend mean, and what exactly are the pyramids, and exactly how, then who built them and how, that stuff interests me because I'm curious. But in the big scheme of things, whatever happened. Cordell says, what was your favorite game animal you've ever eaten? Probably kudu biltong. So that is biltong, which is dried meat, what you guys would call beef jerky, but it's done a bit different. And it comes in like long sticks like that, which you then cut, or sometimes it's pre-cut. And I particularly like biltong that's made out of kudu, which is a big antelope in Africa. And if I had to like hike the mountains or be in the jungle for like a month with my rifle fighting off the robot dogs, I would stuff my backpack full of kudu biltong, water or water purification tablets, and ammunition and a knife. And that would be about it, because that stuff will just keep you going all day. And I really like the taste as well. And you can flavor it, you can put different spices on it. So Sam Werb says, I wish I had as much faith as you do, Wooly. Well, Sam, I'm curious. I'm guessing you're not a sedevacantist, possibly. And Barnhart, which, for all her being totally wrong about the popes and so on, she wrote a series, I think, or at least a very long blog post that was very, very clear, clever, and nicely written about this, which is they don't believe in all that bullshit, like the transubstantiation, the Mass, Jesus Christ, God, the Catholicism. They all pay lip service to, like, yeah, but they're just bullshitters, they're liars. And she's right. Most people are churchians. Even most fundamental, real, true believer Christians are actually churches. They don't really believe in that shit. The people that believe in that shit are like those teenager kids that let themselves be decapitated by the ISIS people rather than deny Jesus Christ. Those people believed, and I don't care if they were Copts or Eastern Orthodox or Sedevacantists. Those people were real Christians. They believed. And until your belief is to that, for your belief to be that strong, you have to know at the deepest level of your DNA, heart, soul, mind, body, etc., that it is the truth. And not just intellectually. Like, for example, I know that 2 and 2 is 4 intellectually, but I wouldn't necessarily be willing to die for 2 plus 2 being 4. I mean, yes, in the ultimate scheme of things, yes, because if they're gonna like make the whole world be like 2 plus 2 is not 4, then the whole world is gonna go to shit. But as a principle on its own, in isolation, 2 plus 2 is 4 is not worth me dying over. But Jesus Christ is Lord, I think is. So if you don't have that level of, it's not even faith, if you don't have that level of knowledge, that level of intrinsic, deep knowledge that it is true, then yes, you're gonna be a lot more scared. You're gonna suffer. William says we humans are more robust and durable than we give ourselves credit for, because life so far has been soft and empty. Fill it up a bit and you will experience this personally. Yeah, that's true. And look, I know people don't read so much anymore, but actually reading and learning the history of Christianity and Catholicism is actually really important. Some people go from being atheist to becoming a proper sedevacantist just as a result of reading and learning and letting those things percolate in their brain. Like I told you, it's this tiny book is 98 pages, yeah? And it's written in a pretty brutal fashion, so it's not like written, in flowery language. It's written how I speak to you guys when I come on the streams, or and yet it's helped a lot of people. And again, I'm not, it's not about me or whatever. Like I get regular emails of people that are like, oh shit, thank you, like really changed my life. You made it worthwhile, and I've become a sedevacantist, I've become a Catholic. And I always reply sort of along the same lines to them, which is like, look, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your words. And I do. I genuinely, it's gratifying, and I'm very grateful when I get those kind of emails. And I tell them, but, the thing is, you did the work. I was just an instrument. I was just a tool that, like, it's like, I don't know, I'm like a screwdriver when you needed to put a screw in a cupboard or something. Or like a nail that you needed to put the 2 planks together, but you did the work. It's you that did the work, and the glory is God's. It's not mine. It's not me that did that. Yes, I physically did write the book and whatever, but I did that because God, because I saw God, because God was gracious enough to allow even a stupid moron like me to see him, and as a result of that, I am trying in my stulted, moronic, weak, corrupt way to share that experience with the rest of the planet. So, Sam says, I'll buy and read the book. Thanks again for the stream. Good night. Oh, no, thank you, Sam. But my point wasn't, I'm not trying to sell your book. I'm just telling you, it's very difficult sometimes to present your intention without people misunderstanding it. Yes, I've written this book, and yes, I've written this book, and yes, I've written other books about Systema and Mars, and I've written fiction books, and And yes, I'm very happy if you buy them, and I'm even happier if you buy them by the pallet load. You know, if you can buy 1,000 of my books every month, great, lovely. I'd love you to do that. I'm not denying that would be nice and gratifying and helpful for me personally. But the point is, I write these books because I must. I write these books because I think they're important, and I want to share that information with other people to save them the years that it took me to see them. You know, the information that I put in these nonfiction books are things that took me decades to figure out or to master or to become good at. And the fiction books are my extrapolation of my concepts to the point where we're now not dealing with reality necessarily. We're dealing with potential realities, which is my fiction as potential realities, potential concepts, ideas and stuff that are not necessarily based in physical facts, but in potential realities that could be, that could have happened, or that could happen, or that might happen, or that maybe happened to someone somewhere in certain context. And if not that, at least they can present to you concepts, ideas, and so on that may be useful, that may spark some positive progress or technology or idea for other people to develop and do something good with. So yeah. Willie Ram says, speaking of deep knowledge, what's missing from us, some of us at least, that the obvious eludes us. Like that you can't surgically change a woman into a man. Yeah. Well, I think that's a bit more than the obvious eludes us. I mean, that is the complete degradation of human beings to the point where they don't even understand the fact that there is such a thing as objective reality. And as a result of that, they don't understand that there is such a thing as logic and reason, and that these are very powerful tools. And that's why I wrote the blog post about the the art of arguing, or whatever I called it. It was up today, I think I put it up today or yesterday. So, go and read that. But I think, the problem there is, I think that's not like, oh, we're not able to see the obvious. I think that's like an intentional perverting of simple facts with a view to create havoc for human beings. But it is true that we miss the obvious, as in, a child that observes how a bee flies is more likely to invent some form of anti-gravity than a guy who can do super advanced maths. I remember when I was putting computers together once, my half brother, who is a mixed race guy. He's had a baby not too long ago, and but he's much younger than I am. And I remember when I was fixing my dad's computer or something, and I was like putting the motherboard together or something, and it's like, oh fuck, I dropped a little, I can't remember if it was a screw or a chip or a piece of board or something, in a place of the computer case that I couldn't tip it and I couldn't get it out. And I was like, I did this consciously. This was a conscious thing. And I called him over and I said, hey, can you, look what's happened. This, I dropped this there. Can you figure out a way that I can get that out of there? And I showed him, I couldn't tip the box up and whatever. And, I looked at it, and within 30 seconds, and I can't remember what it was. I can't remember if it was to use a stick or use his fingers because they were smaller than mine or something. He came up with a way to get it out of there. And I was like, that's why I asked him, because I thought, I'm not seeing something obvious here. And this little kid, who's my half brother, he's gonna look at it without prejudices on what works and doesn't work. And that's what I asked him to do it. And literally in 30 seconds, he sorted a problem out that I've been, trying to fix for 5 minutes. So the obvious does elude us because we've been trained not to see it, And yes, you're absolutely right, because it's obvious. I remember, like I think I've told the story before of my friend who was worried about their daughter and what she's learning at school and stuff. And the conversation was, a 5-minute conversation. I said, no, don't worry. I'll take her out to lunch, and I'll take her to see a film, and we'll talk. And at lunchtime, I said, I asked her, oh, okay, what is confusing her? And she told me, and I was like, uh-huh. She said, yeah, I want to ask you something. So if I take a tail, if I build a tail out of big cardboard, a nice heavy tail, and then I take a needle and I stitch that tail to my butt, and I start to jump around, am I a kangaroo? And she burst out laughing. That was it. Didn't have to deal with that particular problem anymore, because it's an obvious lie, right? It's just somebody pretending. It's nonsense. So Cordell says, how are the olives coming along? God willing, my peach and plum trees will give us fruit next year. Well, the olives are flowering. They're there. It'll be October, November, December before they're ready to be, well, probably October, November before they're ready to be picked. But yeah, I didn't get to prune all the trees. I got to about, I can't even remember. I've labeled and tagged 50 trees and plotted them on a map. And I've pruned about 100 and something trees. I can't remember the exact number. They're definitely over 100, but not much over 100. And a lot of work still to do on the other trees. But I'm like one guy. I can only do so much. So, guys, I've been going for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's been very interesting, but I'm starting to get tired, and I actually have to sort of get up relatively early tomorrow to do some things. So unless there's one of you that can shoot in another question in the next minute or so, I'm gonna wish you all a good night. Thank you very much for your time with me and a very intelligent, useful, and good questions. I've put on the blog, in the post I did about how to make intellectually honest arguments. I've put it in there that it's like I sincerely hope the blog becomes a meeting point for people who can still do classical arguing, or who want to learn how to do it and who want to indulge in it. And I'm brutal with spamming people who just make stupid comments, but that's not. I'm almost sure that's not going to put anybody that shouldn't be in the spam, because the people that actually are able and willing to do intellectually honest arguments generally wouldn't make completely retarded, off-topic, blasphemous, nonsensical strawman comments. So it's very clean. The people that comment on there are people that are reasonable and either ask intelligent questions or make intelligent comments, or at least are respectful and follow the topic. Simple stuff. Can I somehow send some money and get plans for the gasifier? Barnes Bear. Yes, you can. Once I still haven't finished it. I've had some pretty intense things going on here at the moment. I don't want to get into, but we've had floods and all sorts of stuff and family things and whatever. But yeah, don't worry about having missed the crowdfund. Look, you can super chat me right now and send me an email, and I'll add you to the list, or it'll come out later for the people who didn't fund the thing. But I will eventually make the book available somewhere for purchase, and the videos or whatever. Obviously, the people who funded me come first, and I'm way late. I'm way behind, and I keep apologizing to them to the point where I'm embarrassed by the delay. Unfortunately, due to reasons that are pretty much beyond my control, including health, weather, fucking storms, legal shit that I'm dealing with, and whatever. It's just fucking perfect storm. But no, and it's not off topic, Barnes Bear. It's a free for all, my chat. As long as you're respectful, you can ask stuff. And if I don't want to discuss it or whatever, I don't have time, I wouldn't. But yeah, it's not a problem. If you want to ping me an email, if you want to be sure that you're on the list, it's fine. You can do that. Send me an email or go do a donation or whatever. I don't know. And yeah, it's not ready yet. I need to make it absolutely work, and I'm going to try over the next few days as I can, give it another go and keep improving on it. The next adjustment I have to do to it, I'm not sure if it's got to be the filter first or if it's got to be the fan or both, and I'm hesitant to start either one, because in an ideal world I'd want to build a better filter, but building a better filter is a real vicious pain in the ass. But I would probably try and do that first, because I'm not sure how much changing the fan would be. On the other hand, the fan is probably easier to fix, and I might be able to make it variable, so that would be a pretty useful thing to do. So what's your email? Just go to my blog, and there's like contact information there. Let me just type it here, gfilaptop.com. Okay, that's did that type? Okay. Okay, there you go. Oh, it came up twice. Okay, so that's my blog. Go to the blog, go to the contact information, and you can ping me an email there and I'll get it. So yeah, good night, rest well. Thank you, Wooly, and the same to you guys. Good night, all of you. Again, God bless you for having been here, kept me company, and asking me very interesting questions and making interesting comments. I always enjoy my chat with you guys. So thank you for that. God bless you and keep you, and good night, good morning, or whatever you are. Until the next one.